We're only going to discuss one of the Robert Frost poems. It's very hard to discuss poems quickly, and I don't want to put out too many videos, so we're going to focus on his most famous here. This is the link I sent you to the Poetry Foundation. And one of the nice features of this website is that you can hear recordings of it. So I thought we'd start by listening to the poem, and then we're just going to walk through it stanza by stanza and talk about what's happening.
The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and, sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler, long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth, then took the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same, and both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet, knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh somewhere, ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference.
So after listening to this poem, we can start thinking through what Robert Frost really means. And I said before, this is one of the most misinterpreted poems. A lot of people think that this poem is really positive. They think about the idea that we take, the unbeaten path, and that it makes our lives better and more full. So as we look at this poem, we're going to think about if that's really true and if that's what Robert Frost is saying. This is one of the most common poems read at graduations. It's very highly used in American society. So, okay, if we start on our first stanza here, our speaker finds himself in the setting of a yellow wood, so we know that it's fall, and he's talking about these two roads that are diverging. I have an image here, can help you kind of picture it. We have the two roads diverging, the yellow wood behind it, and you'll notice that we can't see where either path goes. You can't quite see what it looks like down the line, but they're diverging or going in opposite directions so that there's this clear choice in front of the speaker. So then if we go back to our poem, our speaker explains that he can't go both and still be one person. So he's standing there and looking as far as he can down one, and then in our second stanza, he decides to take the other. Now, a lot of people look at this stanza and think about why he chooses the second one. And his language shows us that it isn't this clear, decisive, really well-reasoned choice. He takes the other one. He says it's just as fair. It has perhaps the better claim. So there's kind of this unknowingness here. It's grassy and wanted wear, so there's a lot of grass on it. It's not as much traveled. But then our last two lines in the second stanza shows that really the two paths aren't all that different. Though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. So here we find that he just kind of decides on impulse. It isn't this really careful decision. And if we go on to the next one, the next stanza, he's kind of trying to reason through his choice. Both of them equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. So the paths actually look about the same to him, and then he's reasoning to himself, oh, I kept the first for another day. So the other path is still there. He thinks he could go back to it and walk on it someday in the future. But again, our last two lines kind of undercut that point. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, or knowing how one decision leads on to another, and life ends up going in a completely different direction, I doubted if I should ever come back. So in our first three stanzas here, we have our speaker looking at the two roads, trying to decide which one to go on, and then just kind of acting on impulse, but trying to sort of tell a story about it to make it seem like it was a very purposeful decision. A lot of critics point out the anaphora in this first stanza, the and, of him kind of reasoning and hesitating, showing how he's just one person, though he's considering all these different possibilities. If we look at our rhyme scheme, we have would and stood and could. So we have full rhymes there, both and undergrowth. So we have a lot of full rhyme here trying to sort of sound more and more certain. And then our last stanza is the one that people quote the most. They quote these last 3 lines. It comes back to the beginning, repeats the very beginning of the poem. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and it's this long dash here is almost like he's taking a deep breath. I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So a lot of people read this in sort of like Emerson, like he's making this highly individualistic choice. He's choosing to go on the path that no one else has taken. But look at the beginning of this stanza. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. So here this sigh makes it really unclear. He might actually be regretting his decision. So while most people read it as this really positive thing, it actually isn't. It's showing that we make decisions and we act on impulse, and actually it's kind of arbitrary. We don't know what would have happened on the other path. And this is accentuated in the title. Instead of being about the road taken and about the certainty of his decision, how good it was, it's the road not taken. So this poem is one of the most frequently misread poems. People want to see it as this positive, very happy poem about how to make good decisions, when really it shows that we have very little control over our futures and what we decide. All we can do is make decisions and then sort of form narratives around them. On Canvas, I'm going to post a couple different resources that might help you if you want to read a little bit more about these poems. So the Poetry Foundation has poem guides, which are really good. So if we click on the View Poetry Guide, this is about kind of the history of the poem. It's talking about how he wrote this poem for a friend, Edward Thomas, another poet, and he kind of wrote it as a joke about how we make decisions. So you can read that one if you want. And then I found a really interesting article on the Paris Review, and it's about the most misread poem in America, and it's about Robert Frost, and it goes through how the poem has been used in advertising. It has the full text printed, but then it shows people searching for different terms. So this one could be really interesting for you to look at as well. In any case, I hope you've enjoyed reading The Road Not Taken, and I hope that the quiz goes really well.